Imagine an instance of a security guard in an old abandoned ski resort, seeing fresh footprints on the snow through the camera feed leading to the entrance of the resort. None was leading away, yet the camera feed shows no one was at the entrance, or an instance of hikers who were lost due to the unexpected storm finding their way to an old cabin where they saw old photographs of themselves in the old cabin. There are places on this earth where winter never truly ends, where the snow doesn't simply fall but smothers, where the wind carries something more than just the cold, something unseen, unheard, yet felt. Tonight, you will hear these stories, true accounts from those who wandered too far, who strayed where they shouldn't have. They thought they knew the winter. They thought they understood the cold, but they didn't. They couldn't. They never meant to be out this late. It was supposed to be a short hike, just a few hours before heading back to their cabin. But the storm came faster than expected, swallowing the sky, the trees, the trail. Within minutes, they were lost. Emily pulls her jacket tighter around her body, her face raw from the cold. Her partner checks his phone, shaking it, his breath heavy. No signal, no GPS. Just an empty screen staring back at them. They tried retracing their steps, but the snow had already erased them. There was no direction, no landmarks, just white stretching endlessly in every direction. The wind howls, growing stronger. The flashlight flickers again, weaker this time. Their pace slows. Exhaustion creeps in, their bodies struggling against the cold. Then, through the whiteout, something appears. A cabin, small, weathered, the wooden walls barely visible under layers of snow. A single window glows warmly, golden light spilling into the storm like a beacon. It made no sense. There were no cabins on this trail, at least none they knew of. But in that moment, questions didn't matter. Shelter did. They moved toward it, trudging through knee-deep snow, their bodies heavy with fatigue. The closer they get, the clearer the details become. The wood is old but sturdy. The door slightly ajar. A lantern flickers inside, the smell of burning wood thick in the air. James reaches for the door handle. It's ice cold. He hesitates, then pushes it open. The couple steps inside, shaking the snow from their clothes. The storm is instantly muted, as if the cabin walls swallow the sound. Inside, the warmth is immediate. A fireplace crackles in the corner, its orange glow flickering against the walls. A table sits in the center of the room, 2 plates of food untouched, still steaming. The fire was lit, the food was fresh, but no one was here. Emily looks around, frowning. There's only one room. No signs of movement, no footprints leading inside. Just a cabin, untouched yet lived in. She moves toward the table, her hands hovering over the plates. The food is warm. Too warm, as if someone had just been here. But the chairs remain perfectly tucked under the table, no sign of recent use. James turns, scanning the walls. His breath catches in his throat. The photographs, framed, hanging neatly on the wooden panels. At first, they seem old, grainy, black and white images of faceless people standing in the snow. But as his eyes adjust, his stomach twists. There in the pictures, him and his partner, smiling, standing by a cabin. This cabin. The photos were of them, but they had never been here before. Emily steps closer, her fingers grazing the glass of one frame. The image is old, slightly faded, but it's them. The exact clothes they're wearing now. The same expressions, the same snowstorm behind them. The air shifts. A low hum crackles from the corner of the room. An old radio, small, covered in dust, but the dials twitch as static grows louder. Emily steps back, unease creeping in. James swallows hard, moving toward it, reaching out, just as a slow, deliberate knock at the door. They freeze, their eyes lock. 3 more knocks, louder, more urgent. James inches toward the door, his fingers trembling as he grips the handle. Emily shakes her head, stepping back. He exhales, hesitates, then opens it. No footprints, no one standing there, just emptiness. James steps outside, scanning the darkness. The world feels frozen, time paused in place. He turns back, shaking his head, but as he does, his breath hitches. Emily isn't looking at him. She's staring past him, at the window. Something was inside. The camera moves, slow, trembling. Through the frosted glass, a figure stands inside the cabin, motionless, staring directly at her. But its face is wrong, blurred, shifting, like it doesn't belong. She gasps. The lights flicker. The warmth in the room suddenly vanishes, replaced with biting, suffocating cold. The fireplace sputters out, the embers turning to blackened cinders in seconds. The glow from the lanterns fades, the shadows stretching impossibly long. The air is thick, heavy. Emily stumbles back, gripping the table for support. But then, her breath catches in her throat. The plates on the table are empty. The chairs are pulled out. The meal is half eaten. Someone had been sitting there, eating, and it wasn't them. James steps forward, his voice unsteady. He reaches for her, but she's frozen in place, staring at the chairs. Because now, 2 figures are sitting there, their backs to them, perfectly still. The chair nearest to them drags back, slow and scraping. The cabin stretches, warps. The door they came through is gone, replaced with another wall, another frame of photographs. The only door left is the one leading deeper inside. But it leads back to the same room. The cabin is empty, the fireplace cold, the table untouched. Snow swirls outside, peaceful, undisturbed, like no one had ever been there. They woke up in the snow, their bodies numb, their faces covered in frost. The storm had passed. The sky was clear, and the cabin gone. Their footprints in the snow lead to an empty clearing. No building, no door, no sign of what had happened. But when they turned to leave, something caught their eye. A photograph, half buried in the snow. It's an old, faded picture of them, standing by a cabin that never existed. They say the cold dulls the senses. After a while, you stop feeling the sting of the wind. Your fingers go numb. Your breath becomes shallow. And soon, the quiet starts to feel peaceful. But there are places where the silence isn't empty, where it's waiting, listening. Locals warned him about this lake, about the things seen beneath the ice. He laughed it off, said it was just superstition. But no one comes out here alone, no one except him. He had been fishing this lake for years, always the same spot, always alone. But this time, something was different. The old stories, he never believed them. Stories of voices whispering under the ice, of figures standing at the shoreline, watching. He thought they were meant to scare children, to keep them from wandering too far. But now, he wasn't so sure. The air felt heavier, the wind colder, and the silence was no longer empty. A single sound breaks through, coming from beneath the ice, rhythmic, deliberate. The fisherman freezes. Slowly, he looks down at the hole in the ice. A ripple disturbs the water's surface, then another. Something is moving below, and that's when he saw it. The water swirls, turning darker. A shape begins to form beneath the surface, pale fingers reaching upward. Then, slowly, the image fades back in. He is still kneeling by the hole, his breath curling into the freezing air. His gloved hands grip the fishing rod, his body rigid. He doesn't move. He only stares at the water. At first, he thought it was just a trick of the light, a reflection distorted by the shifting water. But the longer he stared, the clearer it became. A shadow moves beneath the ice, slow, deliberate. It's pale, indistinct, hovering just beyond the reach of his lantern's glow. Then, the surface distorts. Something is rising. A single finger breaches the water, then another. 5 in total, motionless, reaching. He inhales sharply, pulling back slightly. His mind searches for an explanation. Maybe it's debris. A fish snagged in the ice. Something logical, something safe. He blinked. The hand was gone. The water is still. A thin layer of ice begins to form over the hole. It was nothing. He told himself that. A shadow, a trick of the light. He had been out in the cold too long. That's all. He exhales, shaking off the tension. Adjusting his grip, he reaches for his ice auger, an old, rusted tool he's used for years. The blade is dull but strong. He needs a larger hole, a better look. He twists the auger down, the blade biting into the frozen surface. Each rotation makes the hole wider, deeper. The ice resists, thick and unyielding. He leans in, pressing harder, forcing it deeper. The auger suddenly jerks. His arms jolt from the unexpected resistance. He had hit something. He frowns, shifting his weight. The blade is stuck. Something beneath the surface refuses to give. Wood, a branch. He had heard of trees freezing beneath the lakes, their skeletal remains trapped beneath the ice for decades. He plants his feet, gripping the auger tightly, twisting it harder. The ice groans, the hole darkens, and then the auger sinks suddenly, too easily, like it had broken through skin. His breath catches in his throat. A wave of nausea rolls over him. The blade is free now, loose. The water in the hole isn't clear anymore. It's darker, thicker. Not water. A single drop of something seeps up from the hole, staining the ice. He stares. His breathing is shallow now, his hands slick with sweat despite the cold. He swallows hard, leaning forward, peering into the blackness below. A faint ripple spreads across the surface. Then, from the depths, 2 eyes stare back at him. Something lunges upward. The hole before him has changed, no longer a simple opening in the ice, but a void. A black, endless depth. And something is moving below. He told himself it was just deep water, that the ice had shifted, letting the darkness seep in. But his gut told him otherwise. This wasn't water. This was something else. The ice beneath him shifts with a groan, a deep, aching sound that vibrates through his bones. The surface is changing, fracturing, but not in random lines. Perfect circles are forming around him, radiating outward, as if something beneath was breathing, expanding, contracting. He scrambles to his feet, heart pounding against his ribs. His boots slip slightly, the ice now too slick, as though wet from something unseen. He plants his stance, scanning the empty lake. No footprints but his own, no movement, nothing but the wind and the distant tree line. Then, another sound, faint at first, barely there, a whisper of breath, but not his. Behind him, he wasn't alone. His pulse slams against his eardrums. Slowly, painfully slowly, he turns his head. His breath catches in his throat. There's nothing there, just empty ice and a stretch of white beyond it. He exhales sharply, trying to steady himself, but the ice beneath him groans. The circles are spreading, widening like ripples in a pond. The ice should be thick here, solid. But it isn't. It's thinning, changing. And that whisper, it comes again, closer this time. His body stiffens. It's not the wind. It's breathing. And then he felt it. A warmth against the back of his neck. A presence, too close, too real. His skin prickles. The breathing is steady, almost curious. His chest rises and falls rapidly. His body is screaming for him to run, but he doesn't. He can't. A single word, rasped just beneath his ear, indistinct, garbled. Not human. His legs move before his brain catches up. He bolts, nearly slipping as his boots skid against the ice. He doesn't care. He doesn't look back. His only thought is off the lake, now. The ice heaves under his weight like something pressing upward, pushing. The cracks widen. His fishing hole, no longer small, has stretched into a gaping maw, a void. Something shifts within the depths. A single pale hand grips the edge of the ice. He runs harder. He didn't stop. He didn't look back. Because deep down, he knew. If he did, it would be the last thing he ever saw. The snow swirls violently now, a blizzard forming from nothing, swallowing the lake in white. His footprints disappear almost instantly. The ice behind him groans, then shatters. The lake stretches outward, untouched. The snowfall has ceased. The wind is gone. And yet, something is missing. They found his chair first, his lantern still flickering weakly against the cold. His fishing rod lay beside the hole, the line still dipped into the darkness below. But him, he was gone. The ice is solid, smooth, undisturbed. There are no cracks, no splintered edges where someone might have fallen through. The fishing hole, the gaping void he had seen, was nothing more than a neat, round opening, as if it had been there for years, as if nothing had happened at all. The rescue team searched for hours. They dragged the lake, sent divers beneath the ice, but the water was clear, the bottom undisturbed, no body, no clothing, no sign that anyone had ever been there. A rescuer kneels by the fishing hole, running a gloved hand along the ice. Their breath curls in the frigid air. They shake their head, standing slowly. Behind them, another man sighs, rubbing his hands together for warmth. Their voices are low, muffled by the cold. Some of them believed he had wandered off, disoriented by the storm, as that the snow had swallowed him whole. Others weren't so sure. His shift had started like any other. A quiet night. Just him, the cameras, and the snow outside. The resort had been shut down for years. Too many accidents, too many missing people. But someone had to watch over it. And tonight, that someone was him. He leans back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. The screens flicker, cycling through empty hallways, abandoned ski lifts, silent parking lots. Then he noticed it. One of the screens, camera 6, displays the entrance. Fresh footprints in the snow, leading toward the resort, but none leading away. His brow furrows. He leans closer, adjusting the feed. The tracks are deep, clear. Someone had walked up to the entrance, but where were they now? The chairlift outside creaks again, swaying unnaturally. The screen glitches, a burst of static. Then something else. A flicker of movement, a shadow stretching across the snow. Long, unnatural. But when he switches cameras, there's nothing there. The security guard straightens, his heart beating a little faster now. He scans the monitors. The entrance is empty, but the footsteps continue. And they were getting closer. The security guard pushes back from his desk, standing slowly. His breath is shallow. He steps to the window, peering out into the night. The snow is undisturbed, the footprints remain, but now the air feels heavier, like something is watching. The radio crackles suddenly, breaking the silence. A burst of static, then a voice, distant, warped. "Don't let it in." The guard freezes. The voice is deep, distorted, barely human. His hands grip the radio, but before he can respond, a slow, deliberate tap against the glass, right beside him. He turns, his breath catching in his throat. Outside the window, the snow shifts, something standing just beyond the frame. Motionless, watching. His fingers twitch toward the blinds, ready to pull them shut, but then the lights flicker. The power dips. The monitors flash static before returning to their feeds. And on camera 6, he sees it. A figure, standing inside the resort, just past the entrance, in the lobby, but the doors never opened. His stomach turns. He stumbles back toward the office door, locking it with shaking hands. The radio hisses again, quieter this time. A whisper, just beneath the static. "It's already in." The security guard's breathing is shallow. He presses his back against the door, his fingers trembling. The monitors flicker wildly now, cycling through footage at random. The lobby, the ski lift, the darkened hallways, and then his office. The camera feed for his own room is live. He sees himself, sees the room behind him, but then his reflection moves. The reflection didn't match. On screen, the figure sitting at the desk isn't him. It looks like him, same uniform, same slouched posture, but its movements are wrong, lagging, just slightly out of sync. He swallows hard, his hands clenching into fists. Then, slowly, his reflection lifts its head, turns, looks directly into the camera, and then it smiled. His pulse slams against his ribs. The lights overhead buzz violently. The walls of the office feel tighter. The monitors go black, one by one, until only his camera feed remains. His reflection, grinning, stands up. And in the room, behind him, his chair slowly pushes back on its own. The hallway beyond his office stretches. The walls bend, elongate. He moves toward the door, opens it, only to step out into the lobby. But that's impossible. He just came from the office. No matter which door he took, he ended up back at the same place. The resort had changed, twisting, looping, no way out. He turns, heart hammering. The front entrance is ahead, but something is standing there. The figure, his reflection. Except now, it's real, watching, blocking the only exit. The next morning, a new shift arrived. The lights in the resort were still on. The radio still crackling with faint static. The front doors were locked. The cameras showed nothing but snow and empty halls. The security office was empty. No sign of him, no coat, no flashlight. Just a single pair of boots by the door, half covered in frost. And on the main monitor, a single camera feed was frozen on screen. The lobby, the entrance, the glass reflecting the empty room. But for a brief moment, just before the screen flickered out, there was something else. A shadow just beyond the door. Still watching. Some places were never meant to be found. Some doors should never be opened. And some things never truly leave. 3 stories, 3 warnings. And yet, we never really listen, do we? If you were in their place, what would you have done? Have you ever experienced something strange during winter? Something you couldn't explain? Share your story in the comments. I might feature it in the next video. And if you thought this was terrifying, just wait until you hear what we have next.